Today I thought we'd just take a look and continue my top 10 favorite, least favorite card series. We're going to look at the top 10 favorite epic cards this time. And as you guys suggested, I'll split it into two. So we'll do the top 10 favorites and top 10 least favorites for the epic cards separately. Thought that was a good idea, so we'll be doing that. And yeah, let's just get into it. Again, we're going to start off with a couple of honorable mentions before we get too far into it. And we'll just start off with one that I do quite like, and that's going to be Bart. Bart is a really neat engine for Collusion. Collusion being one of my favorite decks of all time. And Bart fitting in there really well. He's got his identity right. He's pretty strong, got a bunch of armor. And whenever you play something with a different gang, he gives you coins. You can leverage this however you want. Play one gang, like one of each gang. Get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coins. Just start off with like a double gang, like the Devotion one, and get 2 coins right away in addition to his profit. A lot of uses. Really like this guy. Next up, we're going to go to a neutral card here. This one's a little older. Grégoire de Goron. However you say French names. Anyway, so he did get buffed a little while back. But when he first came out, this guy was like the card. You played him, just your point slam. He did the 1 damage, finished something off, and was really big point slam. When he came out, it was considered to be too good, so he got nerfed a little bit. They buffed him back up a little while ago. Still doesn't see any play anymore. But I just think the idea is really neat, that you have this guy, that once you got something to 1 health, he comes in and he finishes it off. If he finishes it off, it gets really big. I like the idea. It's interesting. It's like Death Blow. Like a lot of Death Blows have this kind of payoff, but his is a Death Blow that requires a specific setup, right? Just that 1 damage. Makes it a little harder, a little more interesting. I just like the idea of just Big Knight coming in here. Next up, we have Darren. So Darren, good old Skala card here. I really like Darren just because, for those who don't know, I play quite a bit of Yu-Gi-Oh! And so the graveyard is something that gets interacted with all the time in Yu-Gi-Oh! And I like the idea of the graveyard interaction. Using this to set it up via either thinning your deck, putting a Crow Mother there so you can revive her, moving a Morkvarg to bring it back, moving something there so you can bring it back with War of Clans potentially, or Drake, boosting it. There's a lot of uses for Darren, which I think is kind of cool. The other graveyard synergy cards kind of similar, but there's not that many of them. I figured we'd put Darren in here because I do like him. I also like that he's flexible, right? You can play on melee as an 8 for 6, which isn't that bad. So that extra flexibility is what puts him here for me ahead of the other graveyard interactive cards like Drake. Next up in the honorable mentions, we're going to go to, I guess, our first little grouping here. You're going to see a few of these. So can't forget about these guys. Not you, Eskel. But Eskel, well, not Eskel Pathfinder. Eskel, Vesemir, and Lambert. Might as well just swap the crafting cost epic. There we go. Just the trio. I really like them. Just classic Gwent in the early days of Homecoming, when you get these guys, like in every deck, you play one, bring the other ones out, back when they're 3 power but didn't have Adrenaline. Adrenaline nerf was kind of needed, but they all got their power back recently. Well, gained a power back to 4, which I really like, and I think they're pretty cool. Unfortunately, the Adrenaline 4 is a little short for him to see too much play outside of Witchers right now, but they are fun to use in my opinion. I like that they all come out together, that the arts always line up. That's a neat touch. Same type of idea here. We can go with Etriel and Morelga. The duos, I just really like the duo type stuff. I think it's fun to get to work. And the fact that when you play these guys, they both do 3 damage, right? And you control the other one, they have some benefit. So they both do 3 damage, which can be kind of useful. Not quite enough to kill most things, but you have Morelga. This one does 7 instead, so doing 7 damage, single target. This one does adjacent units by 3, so kind of an AoE effect. They both have different effects, and I think it's pretty neat. I just like how they work together. It's a little unfortunate I usually can't find spots for them in decks, even in Harmony, where the different typing would be useful, but I do like them. And the last one here we want to mention is going to be another set of cards. It's going to be Brewis. I can't really assume all at once, can we? Brewis, Weavess, and Wispess. The three Crones, right? I can't get them all to show up right now. Oh, we can type in Crone. That'll do it. Yeah, so the 3 Crones. Same idea. The trio that works together. I really like it. These guys used to be in a lot of Monsters decks, kind of fallen off. Sort of like the Witcher trio, actually. Now you see them in some versions of Relics, but not even that many. Although I have seen some people play these guys for a bit of fun. You like renew on one of them, or you can decoy, which is a little bit more outside the box. But you can renew on one of them. That used to be a thing. It was pretty fun. But I like these guys. I think all these cards, where they work together and the ordering matters, and they have flexibility in how you want to use them, are all pretty cool. Now on to the actual list. And we're going to start off with one you guys probably might not expect. It's going to be Gerain Pecans. I really like this guy for what he does. So, obviously when you play him, he's 5 power, gives you 4 cows. And then the next turn you can spawn a 5th cow. Usually they kill him to stop the extra cow, but not always. And the reason I like him, other than the fact he makes a bunch of cows, which I think is kind of funny, is he enables decks for archetypes of decks for factions that don't really always have options, right? So, talking about Swarm here, right? So the only decks that normally swarm the board, like we get a whole bunch of tokens and stuff, are monsters with Tattering or Arrakis Swarm. And then sometimes Northern Realms and Military decks, although they usually play this guy. And then there's not that many. What's the other one? Fire Swarm's the other one. And then Dead Eyes, right? They make a bunch of tokens. But if you're not playing those, it's kind of hard to make a deck that goes pretty wide and makes a bunch of points. This enables a bunch of those, right? You can play this and take advantage of row boosting effects like Commander's Horn. You can take advantage of just all unit boosting effects. Like you get 5 guys out, potentially 6. That's pretty good. It lets you go in pretty quick for things like Yennefer, for things like is it Thaw? No, I think it's Thaw. It's Clear Skies. That's all units on 1 row now, I think. Like Clear Skies. Even go for the Bone Talisman. There's a bunch of uses. And anything that has a transform effect, such as I don't know if Senior can do these, but for sure you can do the Slave Infantry, which is a thing people used to do a lot. Yeah, you can do Senior on these as well. And just any of these transform effects, it gives you bodies to transform with, and just lets you open up different ideas for decks, which I think is pretty cool. You can play this in Revenants, and the Revenants can start picking off the cows. It has a lot of niche, kind of niche uses that are pretty fun. I like what that brings to the game. That is our number 10. Our number 9 is probably another one you're not going to see coming. That's Gimpy Gerwin. And before, I shouldn't have clicked on it. Before I click Gimpy Gerwin, how many of you can actually have any idea what this card does now? Just type in the comments if you knew what Gimpy Gerwin did before I clicked on it. So, 5 power, 1 armor, 9 provisions. Not great stat line, but the 5 and 1 he dies to 6 damage control, but at least it's not 5. But he used to just be the punish for people spamming out copies of the same cards like Revenants or tokens or whatever. Now he's that whenever you play another unit, damage all units with the same provision cost by 1. I just think this is a really neat engine and a really neat kind of control way to deal with stuff. Obviously this is not particularly good, and that's being extremely generous towards the effect. I really wanted to use this guy. To be honest, I almost put him in the Ciri Mutagenerator deck I made a few weeks ago. I almost put him in there. Like, he was in the deck that took him out for Dandelion because it was better. But I just like the idea. If your opponent's playing a bunch of things of 1 provision cost, and then you happen to have those, it's pretty good. Now, when I say happen to have them, obviously, by far the best synergy this Gimpy Gerwin has is in Nilfgaard, because you just make spying copies of the opponent's cards, and they have the same provision cost. So in particular, if you're playing with Mutagenerators with 5, or just any deck with a lot of 5 provision cards, something with Musicians of Blaviken, for example, tend to have a lot of 5s. You just play Gimpy Gerwin. Well, theoretically, if you're playing Gimpy Gerwin, and then you can just play things like Duchess Informant, that'll trigger it, and then you make a copy of something that's 5, and that'll trigger it. I think it's really interesting. Obviously, it's not very good, but I just think it's a cool idea. And I've been really wanting to make a deck with this guy for a long time, but I can never get it to work. I think it just has to be pure assimilate, so we might try that out, but I just like this. I like the idea. Next up, we're going to one that maybe should be a little higher, but it's going to be Bran. So I think this is the most interesting of the destroy cards in the game. I think in general the Witcher ones are, like this one and the Skala one, whose name I forget now. It destroys a damaged one. But I went with Bran over that one, just because I like him a little bit better. Because he has the Adrenaline 3, right? So normally he destroys the rightmost unit on a row with at least 5. 5 units on a row is not that uncommon, but it's also not that common. Like in a short round, it makes it worse in a short round, which is incentivizing you to use it earlier. He also has Adrenaline 3, destroy the rightmost unit on a row with at least 3. That usually happens in any round that's not like 3 or 4 cards. Against decks that aren't just control, obviously. So I really like this. It gives you flexibility on when you want to use it. You want to save it for later in the game and maybe play a risk that they won't have 3 units. You want to use it earlier. Do you want to be using a movement-based deck? Usually you are. You can use a leader charge, because since it's the rightmost card, when you move a unit, if you move an opponent's unit with something like the Guerrilla Tactics charge, leader charge, it always goes to the rightmost point. So use a movement effect, and then Bran, you'll kill the unit, which is a decent payoff for that charge. But you could also just save that charge and maybe kill something that's not quite as big at the end. The opponent can counterplay this if you're playing movement or something, that'll just play their unit not at the rightmost point in the row. So there's counterplay to it, other than the movement charge, but then if they're using a movement charge, they're investing pretty heavily to get rid of it. I just really like the idea. I think it's a cool way to make a removal card. And that was our number 8. So next up, we're going to Skellige, which we'll probably be back to quite a few times, for Olula. I just really like this card. It's a really interesting engine, right? So you got the 6 for 8. So usually they kill it, because if they don't, you can get some good value. But she's got the order damage unit by 2, and that will trigger her ability to do an extra one, right, if it lives. So whenever an enemy unit takes damage from your warriors, damage it by 1, ignoring its armor. The unfortunate thing is raids are just better for increasing your damage than this is, which is a bit unfortunate because no one's going to play this when they just play raids. But I think this card's really fun to use and has some really good synergies. So if you look at any of the warriors that do like multiple points of damage. Huh, who knew that Riptide was a warrior? But we go to Skellige. I did not know that. Go to Skellige and look at the bronzes. Stuff like Marauder. And where are you? Anyway, we'll just say stuff like Marauder that does more than 1 damage can really take advantage of this, because each instance of damage will do an extra 1, which is quite good. And I just like the effect. And obviously things like Blue Boy Lugos is a gold example, or things like the old Udallar deck. You can't do it anymore, but used to be able to do it because he had charges. There's just cards and engine cards like Croc, cards like the Brockvar Hunter. These guys do a fantastic job of taking advantage of Olula over time, and it's really just... Oh, Brockvar Warrior is the one I'm thinking of. Why aren't you showing up? There you are. And Brockvar Warrior is also a warrior. But yeah, I just think that the idea of Olula increasing their damage, increasing the amount of damage they can do, especially warrior, gets so much value from this, because it gets 3 extra damage, and normally you can't kill things with this ability, but the extra ping from Olula killing it means you can still use the Brockvar Warrior to hit multiple things. I think it's a really neat card. I just like it. Moving on to the next one, we have, still in Skellige, something that theoretically works extremely well with Olula, which is Dagger. Dagger, very classic card. Used to be a lot more decks with Dagger. Dagger used to be really popular in the no unit days before there was a unit minimum on the deck. Glad they put that in effect. But he was one of the cards you'd play then, just because you'd play him as a finisher. And he has some really great synergies. Reckless Flurry, the leader, does 4 damage twice. If you just play Dagger and go double Reckless Flurry, you play him, you do 8 damage, ignores armor, you get 8 boost. It's a 20-point play. It's pretty nice. He's got synergy with things like Alula, Brockfire Warrior, the cards we looked at before that do multiple damages. Got synergies with Rain, because Rain does damage, multiple damage in a turn. He's got synergies with things like Terror the Sea, Offering the Sea, the things that do damage to all the units on the board. He just has a ton of synergies, and stuff like, Morkvar, Card of Terror, does damage repeatedly in instances, so it gives your Dagger a bunch of points. He says so many instances of cards that work well with him. You can make a lot of different decks with him and use him as a finisher. He is melee locked, which kind of holds him back sometimes, but his ceiling's so high that having that is a downside. I don't mind it too much. I think he's a really cool card. He synergizes with a lot of stuff. Next up, we are going back to neutral for Artifact Compression. Now this card, it's the spelling of Artifact. This card's pretty simple. Lock and reset a unit. 5 provisions, neutral. Spell. It's just the answer to a card if you don't want to kill it. Like, the card gets reset if it's boosted, and it gets locked. So the question is, why would you play this over a Spores and a Dagger of Vol? Well, because it does both things. And you'll have to, you lose the points for something like Dagger, but it has 2 effects in it, which makes it flexible, and I like flexibility. So if they're playing, so you get Last Say, and they just play like an Ozrel or something, you can reset the Ozrel with this. Or prior to that, if they're playing, I'm just thinking of the Koshei deck, you could play this on one of the Kosheis to lock it and not worry about those other cards. It just has a lot of uses. It has so many uses. The only problem is if you don't have a good lock or reset for it, ideally both, because you don't want to be just using this for a lock. You want to at least be using the reset, because the reset gives you the points that something like a Dagger would get on just existing for the 4 points on it, or 6 points on him, I mean. So that's the only downside to this card, and it's a pretty big downside, is that it doesn't give you any points if you're not resetting. But there's a good number of cards that boost, and if you reset, that reset can just be worth more most of the time than the lock. Although, to be fair, if there's a card you have to lock, it can lock it, and that's the flexibility I like about it. I think it's really neat. We're going back to Skala. Kind of weird, all these cards are Skala, but we're going with Kelpie. Rain is my favorite Skala deck, and Kelpie is the best Rain card pretty much in the game. You could say the Fukusha is better, potentially, but Kelpie just does so much. You can play Kelpie in pure Rain decks. It gives you all that Rain value. The Rain will actually give you double value now, because the Kelpie will start boosting things that are damaged. It has synergies with the beasts, just all beast and Ren free, because you have so many beasts, this thing just puts out like 6 turns of Rain or more, and that's just so much value. It has pretty good synergies with Fukusha itself, because you can revive this, put out more Rain. It has good synergies with things like Dagger that are damage based, because the Rain will do damage. It just works with so much stuff in Skala. And the fact that it has a deck building condition where you have to have a certain number of beasts for it to get amount of turns of Rain is a really interesting trade-off when you're actually building the deck outside of the 25 unit Ren-free beasts, where you don't think about it at all. Usually, you just put in a bunch of them. Outside of that, it makes you think a lot, right? Do you want to use this in like 2 little half-roos and a Fukusha, and then just play those Rain cards to get you your Anglerfish and just play Anglerfish that way? Do you not want the Anglerfish? Do you just want to use this in pure Rain with a bunch of beasts? How many turns of Rain is it worth it for you to put the beasts in? Do you fit in like a Raging Bear or something to get that extra turn of Rain, which takes away from your other cards? It makes a lot of interesting deck building choices. I really like it. And I think the fact that it boosts the undamaged ones, or the unboosted beasts, I mean, so if they're damaged basically, or if they haven't been boosted at all, I guess unboosted is definitely the word for that, but doesn't have an infinite ceiling like something like the Messenger from the Sea or Dagger does, because if their units aren't getting damaged, well, it's not going to be boosting anything more than 1 point. I just think this is a really interesting card. It's really fun to play with and put in a bunch of different decks. Moving on to number 3, we're going back to Scoia'tael. We're going to Treant for, I bet you guys know this one, Treant Bore. Treant Bore, I think I said in my top 10 favorite legendary video that Kraken was my favorite designed card in the game because of how well it incorporates the theme and how the card works. Treant Bore is my second favorite design of a card in the game. I just think the design on this is fantastic, right? If you have a Dryad, he gains Zeal, comes out faster. If he's in the ranged row, he runs forward and tramples the enemy, doing damage. If he's in the melee row, he retreats back in the woods and heals himself up. It makes a little cycle, right? He charges out, does damage, retreats back and heals up, does it over and over. I just think that's so cool of a design for a card, especially where obviously it goes with his art, which is fantastic. And I just think this card's awesome. I remember when this thing first came out, everyone's like, this is the best 8-cost card in the game. And nowadays, he's gained a loss of provision, gained a power. People don't play him anymore. But this card, the design, I just can't get over how, I just love the design of this thing. And it's really fun to use, right? You can combine it with other things like play movement. And then it's in your range road, you run it forward, you move it back, run it forward again. You could potentially have the Elf Lady who moves things every turn, run this forward to deal 2 damage, use her ability, move it back, use a card from your hand like a Dragoon to move it forward again. Just, you can change it up if they damage it, because it makes a cycle, right? Every other turn it's going to heal or do damage. If they move it forward and use its ability to do 2 damage, and then you move it back range, and they think, oh, I got my window now to hit it. They hit it with like a damage card. And then you move it forward so it can retreat and heal. There's so many interactions with it. I just really like it. And I think it makes a lot of choices. I think it's fun to play and also pretty fun to play against because you kind of know what's going on. And you can play it around. Maybe they have a movement, maybe not. I just love this card. Moving on to number 2. We're going back to Skala. I'm going to type in Skala, it's not it. Well, that would give us a lot of choices, but not the one specifically we want, which is Offering to the Sea. I think this card, kind of like a couple of the other ones we've talked about, just has so many uses and a very interesting way to punish going wide. Right, so say the opponent's going really wide. Sure, you can lacerate them. Sure, you can play Surrender on them, which is much better than lacerate if they're playing something like Reavers. But those just do damage to the row. Sure, that's a row punish. That's fine. But Offering to the Sea is such a more interesting way to me to punish wide boards and swarming the board with like a bunch of tokens. So what it does is obviously damages all units on the battlefield by 1, then spawns a siren on your row and boosts this siren by the number of allied things hit. So if you're only hitting allied cards, it's like a net 2 because it gives you the siren, but all the points you gain would be the ones you lost usually. Obviously, with things like healing, with things like armor, with things like Draco Turtle in particular, stuff like that, there are a lot of ways to, in Skellige especially, to mitigate this. But if the opponent's going wide, you do 1 damage to all of them, and say they have like 10 units, it's 10 damage, plus you get the Siren, and plus maybe you have any synergies with your cards. Maybe Trevor something's Berserk, it heals back up like the Jirsek guy. It just has a lot of interesting uses, and it combos very well with healing. Things like Half-Roof Singer, Heme Flamennica, some of my other favorite cards that aren't quite on this list. Though Heme Flamennica almost made it. It has so many interesting synergies. The good old Dagger Offering to the Sea combo. I used to make decks around that. That was really fun to pull off. And then the fact it's an alchemy, you can play against Bride of the Sea. Do it again. I just think the way it synergizes with so many different things in Skala, it synergizes with healing, with self-damage, it synergizes with Bloodthirst because it damages all the opponent's cards. It has alchemy synergy. It just works so well with so many things that I think it's a shame it doesn't see more play, but I love this card. I think it's fantastic. Really a lot of fun to find ways to make use of it. And that brings us to our number 1 favorite epic card, which if you are a long-time viewer, you may know. If not, this might come as a bit of a surprise. We're going with Prize-Winning Cow. Why do I like Prize-Winning Cow so much, other than the fact that it was in a bunch of our early videos? I just think the idea is cool, right? you play the cow, it transforms into a Chort. I did play The Witcher 3 quite a bit. And for anyone who wants to kill a bunch of cows and find out what happens, well, this might be a preview, but I'm sure most of you know already. But I just really like the idea of the cow just turning to this massive Chort. It's a 1 power for 6 revisions, which is obvious. I'm not saying this card's good in any way, by the way. This card is terrible. But I think it's hilarious, and I love it. So yeah, if this card lives a turn, you turn the 1 into a 10. Is a 10 for 6, just point slam good? Yeah, it's alright. It's not bad. It's actually pretty good. Problem is you have to wait a turn for that zeal to go off. Or the order to go off. You can give it zeal with like siege support, I believe, and Vess. They can give neutral zeal, if I recall correctly here. Don't think that was changed. You have to give zeal. And Vess should as well. This is the one they never see coming if you use one of these on it. But obviously you can always use filter on it. Petrie's filter. You always use this zeal on it. Although, really, the cow isn't worth it unless you get its order off without having to give it zeal, because it's a lot of commitment for something you'd rather use on a different order. But I just think the idea is really cool. And I think it's funny to never get this thing to go off. But sometimes you just play this against decks that don't have damage, and they sit there and they stare at it, and they can't do anything, and you just transfer it into the Chort. Now, I really wish there was a way to buff that the Chort was like a 15-point card. I made a whole video on prize winning cow at some point. I really wish it was 15, just to be better payoff for this, because the risk is so high that I think this should be more worth it. Honestly, with the Balance Council, we're going to be campaigning for this to go down like 4 provisions at some point, because I think that'd be a lot more interesting, a lot more fun. At least 5, probably 4 though, because even at 5 this thing's bad. Is the 1 damage, even at 4 it's probably still a bad card because of the 1 damage kills it, and you've wasted your whole card. But with the 10 power Chort, I think it'd be kind of fun. I'd like to see it. And I just really have a lot of fun with the prize winning cow and trying to make decks where the cow just kind of fits in there. Obviously the cow itself is a beast, and the Chort's a relic, so there's a tiny bit of synergies there. Although, to be fair, if we made this 4 provisions, every run-free beast deck would just stick it in. Maybe they wouldn't. I think that'd be interesting. Anyway, this one's a kind of a weird one, but I just have a strange affinity to really liking this card because I think it's funny. We made a bunch of decks with it. So that's the list, guys. What are your favorite epic cards? Do you hate any of the cards that I like? Let me know in the comments. But we'll be coming back pretty soon with the least favorite ones, which will be a little less fun maybe to make the video on. But hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. That'll be it for this one, guys. Hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next time. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. And you can check out some more videos over here. And thanks for watching.